Hey, my friends. Pastor David here with this week's Midweek Minute. So we started a new series of messages this past weekend simply called Why? Trying to make sense of God's will in the hard places of our lives. The places where life gets so chaotic or so challenging that we wonder if God has somehow abandoned us. We talked about Psalm 13, where David asks the question of God, "How long, Lord?" We talked about the fact that that happens 20 plus times in the book of Psalms alone in the Old Testament, where David or some author of a psalm says to God, "How long? How long must I wait for you? How long will it feel like you're not around?" And as we start to wrestle with the why questions that come to all of us at some point in time, that sense that God is up to something that we can't understand, that sense that even when we are praying for someone or something, that God just doesn't seem to answer and God doesn't seem to be around. That in order to make sense of those questions, the very first question we have to get through our minds is it okay to ask the why question of God in the first place? And the answer that David gives us in the book of Psalms, that Jesus gives us from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It's okay to ask the question. That if our relationship with God is deep enough, if it's open enough, the way God desires it to be, that we can say anything to God, we can ask anything of God, we can share with God what we feel, even when that's frustration and anger at God Himself. There are multiple expressions of that in the book of Psalms alone, certainly throughout the Scriptures. And like I said, even Jesus asked the question, why? I hope that this week, if there is something that you're wrestling with, if there's something that you're wondering about in your life, why doesn't God seem to be responding? Ask Him. Talk to Him about that. Remember that the real image that we want to have of God is not that of this commanding officer that says you've got to do this because it's your duty. The real image of God that we want to cultivate is that of a parent, a father, a mother, a grandfather, a grandmother, an aunt, or an uncle, somebody that we trust, somebody that we can bare our soul to, and know that the response will always be listening and love and compassion. We're going to continue to wrestle with these why questions in the week that is coming up for us. It's Mother's Day weekend. We look forward to giving thanks for moms in our lives. But the question that we're going to wrestle with is, where is God when suffering comes our way? Especially when that suffering is kind of random, kind of unexplainable, that we can't really figure out where it comes from. We'll talk about that this coming weekend here at First Church. I invite you to be with us, either on Saturday nights at 6 o'clock for a more traditional type service, or Sunday morning at 10:30 for our contemporary service. And of course, you can catch us online either one of those two times. Until then, friends, remember, keep looking up, and I'll see you later.